Hey folks, Western civilization is dying. It's sort of like in the cartoons when Wile E. Coyote is standing on the edge of the cliff holding a big anvil, about to drop it, but this time he's got two anvils, a big anvil on the bottom and a little anvil on top of it. The big anvil is going to hit us first, and that's progressivism. The little anvil is going to hit us second and finish us off, and that's radical Islam. We've been here before. In the 13th century, the Mongol horde riding across Europe virtually wiped out Western civilization as a whole. European philosophy, religion, culture, Western society as a whole was just about snuffed out. Some of the West's greatest manuscripts were stashed away by Irish monks in remote monasteries and therefore preserved. Well, we defeated them, we beat them back. But this video is not so much about fundamental Islam as it is about progressivism. As the Western world of the pre-progressive era, 1960s and before, would not at all be threatened by fundamental Islam. I will explain, however, the second anvil and how it's going to hit us. Islam, as practiced by educated, accountable people, is not unlike Christianity and Judaism. In fact, within Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam are all referred to as people of the book, as we share common roots. Before you go off on me on not knowing what I'm talking about, I've lived in 4 Muslim countries and personally know more Muslims than I know non-Muslims. Fundamental Islam is evangelical in nature and is the fastest growing world religion. We look at conversions by young Westerners and wonder why, yet this is symptomatic in a society where progressives have worked for decades to strip away traditional beliefs and structures, leaving young people grasping for something to believe in. As Islam is evangelistic, as Catholicism and Protestantism used to be, that young person marries to a spouse who converts, and then they have children who are brought up in the faith and marry others, and so on and so forth. Think I'm wrong? Check demographic data for Lebanon, Ethiopia, and the Seychelles Islands. These are non-immigrant impacted countries that had a majority Christian population at one time. You'll find that Christian populations are shrinking and Muslim populations are growing exponentially. A gentleman that I met in the Seychelles claimed that young Seychellese men could get their university education paid for in full by wealthy foreigners if they converted to Islam. What's the difference between moderate Islam and fundamental Islam? Fundamentalism can be read as extremism. Think about how many different ways that people interpret the Bible and some of the strange things that they insist that are in there. It's basically the same thing in Islam. The difference between Christianity and Islam is that Christianity has undergone a reformation, divided down between Protestantism and Catholicism, matured, and become accountable through structure and individual responsibility. Islam, on the other hand, has become dominated by standalone mullahs and other clerics who may pronounce fatwas or jihad at will, without accountability to anyone. This has trickled down to the individual who must believe without question or accountability. The woman was uncovered, so of course she was raped. In Judeo-Christian tradition, the sinner is responsible and accountable for his sins. Fundamental Islam has not evolved into this yet, so the temptation is to blame and the sinner is the hapless victim. Within this realm of fundamentalism, aberrant behaviors such as rape, genital mutilation, and stonings become sanctioned. If there is a stoning, you had best be throwing stones along with everyone else or risk being stoned yourself. Compare this to our earlier history when whole communities will come out to burn a witch, and you had better be screaming to burn the witch with everyone else, or you might be next in the hot seat. I believe that Islam will eventually reform itself over time, and more thoughtful heads will prevail, as Christianity did. But remember, the Inquisition lasted for a very long time. Western civilization's immune system, if you will, has been weakened by a half century of progressive cancer, which is eating at our society by dividing us down into victims groups, pitting us against each other and eroding our foundation. And Europe is a decade ahead of us in this illness. Think for a moment of Sweden. Whoa, you're wrong. That's what Sweden was, what Sweden used to be. Sweden and Japan were the only homogeneous industrialized nations on Earth until recently, when Sweden decided to allow mass influxes of immigrants. Next to Lesotho, Sweden is now the rape capital of the world, and this has just occurred in the past 5 years. Crime statistics are not kept by ethnicity in Sweden, yet the rape crisis began after the wave of immigrants and is only attributed to immigrants. Swedish prisons are currently full of immigrants. Sweden's population is less than 10 million, but it's estimated that between 5 and 15% of Sweden is made up of foreign immigrants. That is why Sweden serves as a microcosm, a petri dish, if you will, for what is occurring throughout Europe and what is beginning here at home. New York Daily News reported June 20th of 2014 that Swedish health authorities discovered that every girl in one class has undergone genital mutilation. 60 cases were found in an eastern Swedish school, according to the newspaper report. Nearly half had suffered the most extreme type of mutilation. The Swedish government has also okayed the construction of mosques and the public call to prayer announced from the minarets. See the link below to a YouTube video of that first call to prayer in Stockholm. Swedish has an uber progressive government and a subsidized press, a subsidized media, which will not report on anything other than the facts of the case and not who committed the crimes. If you dare to speak up against the immigration policies or the actions of the immigrants within Sweden, you're branded a Nazi. Welfare rolls in Sweden are currently populated almost exclusively by immigrants. And Norway and Denmark are close behind Sweden. Now, as for Germany, I read a lot of news to include German news, but I'm at a total loss to understand what is going on with Angela Merkel. I don't know what she's doing. In 2010, Chancellor Merkel stated that multiculturalism has failed and would not work. And yet now she's thrown open the gates to all of these refugees coming into Germany. In fact, in Munich, in one day, they had over 10,000 refugees arrive, most of them young men from various countries from Eritrea, Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, etc. 10,000 refugees in one day. That would swamp a city the size of New York. I am totally mystified by her change of heart. I am only able to really read Deutsche World and Der Spiegel and pretty much getting official party lines. So I don't understand what she's doing. Since I don't speak German, I can't read the German blogs. If you're German and can explain to me what the heck is going on, please do. In France, as you know, they had the Charlie Hebdo shootings, and what you may or may not know is there are tons of no-go areas in France and the UK. No-go areas are neighborhoods which are populated almost exclusively by Muslim immigrants, and even the police do not go there because the police are attacked when they go there. Did you know that in UK right now the most popular name for newborn boys is Muhammad? Oh, back home in the US, what's the fastest growing language in the US? It's not Spanish, it's Arabic. So, what's the root of this problem? It's not Islam, it's progressivism, homegrown progressivism. Progressivism is a religion in and of itself, yet it eats its young by dividing itself over and over and over again into smaller and smaller groups of those who perceive themselves as victims. For example, we first talked about gay and lesbian rights, which quickly spun into LGB, which quickly spun into LGBT, which has now spun into LGBTQ, the Q standing for questioning. Okay. Progressives believe in nothing but the state and worship nothing but their own dogma. Look up, take the time and look up, if you will, the Frankfurt School. The Frankfurt School was a bunch of professors and philosophers who had fled National Socialism in Germany in the 1930s and made their home here. They couldn't quite comply, or they couldn't quite resolve in their mind Marxist-Leninism. They did take elements of it. They took elements of chaos theory. They took just all different elements and hobbled them together into the movement known as modern progressivism. Now, these people basically set up as college professors and slowly over generations churned out more like themselves and gradually infected the university system throughout the United States. Now, they believed, or progressivism, modern progressivism believes in destroying the structural support of the family, of religion, and then national identity itself. Because if you think about it, national identity itself is a threat to progressive government. Think on that. Think on that, because it's true. In the early 1960s, did you know that black Americans had a lower divorce rate than whites? Just nominally so, but they had a lower divorce rate than whites, with more black children being raised in two-parent homes than any other racial makeup. As the first victims of LBJ's Great Society, black families were the first to crumble, with all other ethnicities following suit. Fathers are expendable in the progressive paradise, and the state will raise the children with progressive ideals. We now see and will see intensified Judeo-Christian values being deemed immoral, backwards, and hateful. Immoral. Think about that. Think of the bakery which refused to bake the gay wedding cake, the nuns who do not wish to pay for birth control, etc., and look at the way that they're spoken of in the public media, basically as they are the heretics. Kids have been suspended from school for wearing Air Force logo jackets. Mexican American kids have pulled down the stars and stripes and raised the Mexican flag at their high school. Some schools do not say the Pledge of Allegiance anymore. New York and California may allow illegals to vote in state and local elections. Our national identity is being diluted, and speaking out against it is considered racist, jingoistic, and overly aggressive. Progressives do not allow dissension by any means. Nothing is open to discussion, and nothing can be questioned. In progressivism, intentions mean everything, results mean nothing. So whatever program has been spun up, they'll just spin up another program if that doesn't work, and another and another. And the goal is to make everyone dependent on the government, everyone subservient to the government, beholden to the government. If you look at the roots of those who influenced Barack Obama, the most, they have their roots in progressive Frankfurt School style quasi Marxist theory. This is the man that leads us today. This is not a conspiracy theory or some sort of New World Order plot, but it's a philosophy that's rooted in the same teachings which chip away at our system throughout generations. The progressives use tools like control of the language, feminism, political correctness, big government programs, fuzzy science, and above all, critical theory to dig at our roots. And through their influence in the media, they pit us against each other over issues which will keep us busy. Sure, Planned Parenthood government funding is baloney, and black lives do matter, as all lives do, but we're fed what we're fed, and it keeps us at each other's throats. I've got to experience sitting in a foreign airport waiting for my flight to come in to go on somewhere else. And at the next gate, a flight came in from the United States. Well, all manner of Americans piled out the gate, onboarding that plane. All colors, all shapes and sizes. But it struck me of how American they all seemed. We are one people. To foreigners, we look as if we are one people, and we cannot allow progressives to continue to divide us down. How do we combat this? Do you realize that books such as Animal Farm, 1984, Fahrenheit 451, and Anthem are no longer required reading in most schools? Read them to your kids, read them to your grandkids. Discuss them. Teach the Constitution and the Bill of Rights to your children and grandchildren. Make sure that they understand that it is not freedom of speech within a designated area or freedom of speech except for hateful or unpleasant words, but just freedom of speech. The same goes with the other amendments, and is not to be bamboozled by progressives teaching that a well-armed militia has something to do with the past and had something to do with hunting. It's about checks and balances on the government itself and the ability to defend oneself. If you have religion, teach your kids religion, but more than that, teach them why it is important to you, why it matters, why you believe, and be able to answer all of their tough questions about it. If you do not have religion, you need to have a well-defined set of principles for living. Stand by that and teach that to your children with the same answers to those same tough questions. You need to search further for news and think critically with everything that you're being fed. Start with the question, who's getting paid? I understand that the issues at hand are emotional and important to you, but take time to also look at the big picture. Educate yourself and become an advocate for Western civilization and an educator to those not in the know. This is why I continue to rant about the 2016 election. Imagine 2 to 3 more progressive Supreme Court justices appointed in the next decade with progressive rulings for the next 50 years. Imagine 8 more years of letting in immigrants of the caliber that we see now, and you will also be able to see what I see, which is a collapse of the system, a loss of Western civilization, and the inevitability of something stronger taking over. Thanks for your time. Stay safe.